Point being that American car culture has been very badly understood and appreciated quite often in a lot of the UK and Europe and anywhere else.
I came up behind someone in the summer, a friend of mine, they were like, what the hell is that? It just looks like it's going to eat you.
You know, I pull it out and then I ram it back in and I put the little rubber thing back neatly.
If you've just joined this podcast, I apologise now.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Car Podcast with Chris Harris and his friends. This is episode number 17. I do have other friends, I think.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
I've met them.
This week, and this is in no way been chosen because one of us has a story to tell of their own ingenuity. But what is the miracle breakdown that you've managed to fix yourself? You've not needed to rely on a third-party recovery service. Over to you, for some reason, Neil Clifford.
This is a very, very rare event.
Unique?
And unique, in fact. Yes, I'm deliberately and very thoughtfully a member of the RAC and the AA.
Really? I love the AA.
Yeah. Which is clearly slightly illogical, but I think you only get like 4 or 5 breakdowns before they start sort of blacklisting you. So
not with the AA.
Well, not with the AA. Not with the AA.
No, we like the AA.
If you've got an E61 M5, I can assure you, you can work that one out quite quickly.
But I like to sort of stagger my breakdowns between my supporting breakdown companies, just so I don't get blacklisted. But yeah. I rarely drive an old classic car into London on a Saturday, particularly December when the traffic's a bit crap. But I was invited to my own coffee shop, in fact, by a guy called Martin. I think his thing is called Tribal Group or something. Lovely guy, whole big gang of Porsche chaps that wanted to come down and visit Salvino. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to give an old car a run, you know, there's no salt, you know, I'm going to practice what I preach. I jump in the little 65 short wheelbase 911, running beautifully, scream down to London for an hour. Thought, oh, this is magic. What a magic car, even though there's no bloody heater. So I was freezing my nuts off. But, you know, pleasurably freezing my nuts off. Had my little coffee, had my little croissant, had a nice little chinwag for new people that I'd met. Off I went, started again. Off I went, played tennis, actually. And then when I got in the car after the little tennis thing, you could tell it was just something had happened. I don't know what had happened, but it was running on about 4 cylinders. The battery felt a bit sluggish, turning it over, got it going. But then I was popping and banging down to King's Cross from Camden. I thought, oh, shit, what do I do now? No, I'm going to keep going. You know, you think you're always optimistic about that sort of backfiring situation. Oh, they're clear. It will clear in a minute. And they never do they, those situations? But
actually, you know what? To interrupt you there, old 911s often do. Old 911s often do clear themselves. So I think
Mercedes never do. If it's running on 4 and a 6 Mercedes, forget it. You've got to get the plugs out. You've got to get a man. Sometimes Porsche do sort of self-heal. I think that's true. So I was going
down York Way.
I was going down York Way.
Yeah, so you can't clear it down there.
Well, it obviously wouldn't clear. And I was going down York Way, got to King's Cross, got to the little traffic lights, and I've got a Subaru parked under my office in Farringdon. So I came to a very...
Is that the emergency Subaru?
Yeah, a very difficult T-junction mentally now, because it was running terribly, popping, bang. You know when someone thinks there's been a gun shot, and I'm like, nope, I'm going to do a right. It's going to clear. So off I went because I had to get to how I was working. I had to get to places, and then Marylebone Euston Road or Marylebone Road, whatever it's called, completely cuts out, dead, middle lane. I'm like, shit, I'm buggered now. You know, when you've got a whole plan of events and, you know, your day's buggered, you're 4 hours waiting for the RAC man. So I jump out, fortunately, lovely little light little car. I push the car probably 60, 70 yards, meters on my own, down the bus lane, big red bus up my arse, still bloody dark almost. I'm thinking, oh no, I'm gonna be stuck for hours. Whipped it into a little cul-de-sac, got it off the main road, and then you're like, bugger. Then you've got to remember the RAC number. You haven't got your wallet, so you can't remember. You've saved it in your contacts. Then you remember your insurance company has also got breakdown. So I ring that one. And then you're 5 minutes on the phone waiting for someone to answer, and they want you to do it online. It'll be quicker, but you don't want to do it on. It's all a drama, all that shit. People need to make it easier for us people that are probably their most profitable customers. Anyway, you get through. You give them your postcode. They're like, well, we'll call you back, sir, in an hour to tell you how long we're going to be.
Did they not ask the famous question, are you a woman on your own in a dangerous place?
No, they said, are you in a active lane?
Ah, okay, yeah.
And you always want to lie, don't you? Because you think, is that going to speed it up?
You should have said, yeah, I'm in the middle lane of the A4.
Well, I can't lie. I can't. You can't, because you're like, what if there's someone in front of you that isn't? They're in a whatever they're called, those modern motorway things, stupid aside.
Smart motorway. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
Someone's going to die because I've lied. So you don't lie, and you're like, no, I'm fine, but please could you hurry? Oh well, we'll call you back. So you've made the call and you've got the text, so you're engaged, and you think, okay, well, I'm buggered now. I'm going to go for a coffee or something. But then you do let's just look under the bonnet. even though you actually don't really know what you're going to be looking for.
Can I say one thing here? That would have been problematic because you'd have found the luggage area.
Well, the rear bonnet.
Yes.
So you open that up, and you know what? I noticed something wrong, which is also very, very rare for me.
That is
the little cable that's coming off the coil into I think that goes into the middle of the distributor.
It does.
Yeah, that was taut. It was on an angle. It'd come away. Maybe this could be the moment. So I pull it out, and then I ram it back in, and I put the little thing back neatly.
If you've just joined this podcast, I apologise now.
Yeah. And
a lot of bossy action so far. Yeah.
And then what happened was it turned over, but it didn't start. It turned over, and I thought, I've nailed it. But it wouldn't start, and I'm like, right, something, maybe one of those people at the coffee shop sabotaged my car. Why has this happened to me now? You start blaming people, don't you? Your nasty side comes out, and then I'm like, right, I'm gonna wiggle every on the plugs, on the distributor, the middle one. I'm going to wiggle everything. Just fucking wiggle everything, right? That was my strategy. And then the only time where you don't like talking to people about your car is when you're broken down, because lovely people come up to you, don't they? And they want to start fucking talking, and it's the one moment where you want to say, please, can you just fuck off? But you don't. What year is it? It's 1965, and I've broken down. Please, you don't want to. It's that one little miserable moment that you have with a classic car where you're embarrassed, you're pissed off, you don't want to be talking to anyone, you want to shut the door, put the window up, not engage with anyone. Anyway, I wiggled everything, and it started.
Oh my days.
It started. And it not just started, it started perfectly.
With that lovely zing.
I'm like, oh my God, I've actually nailed it. So then you do okay, what's my strategy now? Am I going for the Subaru? Have I repaired it completely? Is it going to come back? Do I cancel the breakdown? Do I leave the breakdown open just in case I drive 50 yards and you break down again? So I'm going for the Subaru. I've got a 5-minute, 10-minute dash from the back of King's Cross to Farringdon, and you try and do it without stopping. you not going through red lights or anything, but you're like, I'm just going to get that Subaru. And then when you get there, you do that beautiful thing. You go onto the RAC app and it says, would you like to cancel your breakdown? And it gives you the options and it says, the car is now working. And you click on that little tab and you're like, oh, what a bloody genius I am. So that was my little experience of yesterday. And I'm sure everyone's got an equally good story as that.
I think
Brilliant.
if you're a self-professed non-mechanic and you're not that handy with stuff, and you suddenly fix something, there might be no greater pleasure.
Oh,
Because I think those of us that aren't very good with spanners really admire those that are, and we look upon it as a skill that we just wish we had.
yeah.
Chris Cooper, what's your self-diagnosing and fixing car story?
So when I read the question, it said miracle breakdowns. And at this Christmas time, I thought there was some sort of godly or divine intervention that sort of
When you were
helped
riding a donkey.
helped you
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, helped along the way, or some sort of immaculate misconception of some sort. I have actually fixed a car. I have actually done an engine rebuild on a car
Bloody hell.
and made it go. I say rebuild. I mean, I had to reassemble it because I'd sort of mistakenly disassembled it. So years ago, when I was first in London, my flatmate Julie, she wasn't my Julie, she was somebody else's Julie. She had a Mini and it sort of died. And I diagnosed that the head gasket had gone on this A-series engine Mini. And she looked at me very plaintively. And I was living in a house full of young ladies, none of whom were my Julies or young ladies, but they thought I was the man of the house. Not helped by the episode once where the girl who owned the house, she was a big girl, and I was in the laundry room of this very nice house one day, and I found in the dryer of this house, the tumble dryer, what I can only describe as a parachute-like brassiere. And I thought, I may have said, have I told you this before? Stop me if I have. So I thought it would be entertaining to see whether my head would fit into the cup of
Oh, my.
and simultaneously, I discovered that it did at the point where the owner of the bra entered the laundry facility.
You know what you are? You are like the anti-hero from some sort of slightly crass Richard Curtis movie, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're like the sort of a pound shop. What's his name? The bloke from
The bloke never
Paul
can
Wedding.
remember the name of, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so Julie wasn't Julie's brassiere. She has many. So I said, I said, I could fix that. So I went and bought a Haynes manual, but I didn't really read it. I mean, who reads the manual? How hard can it be? You just go and do it. So when I got all the head bolts off, I took the head off, and of course, all the water that was in fell into the pistons. I thought, well, I've done that wrong. So I had to mop all the water out of the pistons. Anyway, long story short, I mopped it all out, got a new gasket, head gasket,
Yeah.
from the local factor's shop. This has been early, mid-90s. Fitted it all together, got a torque wrench from a mate, followed the bits of the Haynes manual that I could be bothered to read, fitted it all together. Julie, by this point, because this took the whole weekend, she'd gone off with some of her friends because she had a social life and I didn't. So Sunday afternoon, she came back. And I said, I think I'm nearly finished. And so I had a small audience when it came to putting the little key in the ignition in the middle of the dashboard Mini. And bugger me, it started. I felt like a motoring god. I'd done a thing. I fixed a car that actually had broken down. I'd used spanners and everything. I've dined out on that for the last 25, 30 years.
That's impressive.
Very impressive indeed. Very impressive.
Yeah.
Manish, I'm not going to say this with a grin, but tell us when you miraculously fixed something by the side of the road.
It wasn't by the side of the road. I couldn't describe it as a miracle, and it's not really a fix. But I once noticed when I used to go and do my Monday clinics at Mount Vernon that my rear number plate light wasn't working.
Oh.
It just wasn't working. And I
Does
had a
that
look.
qualify as a major breakdown, Manish?
It counts as miraculous because I fixed it.
Yeah, okay, that is right.
Basically, it was great. A stone had gone up and smashed the perspex, and actually had got in and damaged the little bulb and the little connector. So I disassembled the whole thing. I got my model kit stuff out, which I hadn't taken out in about 20 years. And I cut out the little bit of the perspex that was broken. In fact, when you see the car, you'll see it. And I very carefully cemented a new little bit of perspex in, got the connector in, put the unit back, and it hasn't malfunctioned in 10 years.
That's
Wow.
impressive.
I love the idea of reverting back to the model kit. That's you love, and because the problem then is that you've got the delay. You open the model kit and all the memories come rushing back. So you don't do anything for the next 20 minutes. You're like, I remember those long nose pliers. I remember those.
Scalpel.
Yeah, I remember that Tamiya cement. I remember all that
Humbrol.
stuff. So, yeah, I'm not very good at spannering, but I spend a lot of time around people that are really good. And I think the more time you spend around people that are really good, the less inclined you are to get involved, actually, because you just know that they're out of your league. But, you know, if I'm really pushed, I can probably fix something or have a go. Or I'm not bad at diagnosing, probably, but I can't. That's where it stops. So I'm going to do a Cooper. I'll give you two. The first one is it's non-specific, but if you've ever been lucky enough to gravel rally in the UK and lucky enough to fire it off, as I have a few times, into the trees, that's when you really have to have your wits about you and try and work out what's going on. And there are two phases to this. Almost wherever you are in the UK. The first one is you're alone with your co-driver and you have that sort of slightly awkward discussion as to whose fault was it. Almost always mine. And then you start to think about what can we do to fix this and make it work again. So that's normally quite logical. Then the spectators arrive, and that's when it becomes really funny. So on the RAC rally a couple of years ago, I went off at reasonable speed down a bank, and the thing was on its side. And watching, I absolutely assumed this vehicle would not get out of that ditch. The only way it was going to come out was if a Chinook put something underneath it and cradled it out. And all I dealt with was a load of people going, we'll get it out. And they sort of had half a rope, a can of beer and something else. That's all they had. And some coats and a sandwich. And I don't know how they did it, but 45 minutes later, they had this car out of a ditch. And then one of them just walked past me and went, never underestimate spectators. I thought, you're absolutely... Honestly, what they can do is bang on. So
I'm going to raise a glass to that.
Yeah.
Rally spectators around the world.
What they can do, and they love it. They're on the scene. Oh, God, what can we do? It's better than circuit racing for that. But in terms of fixing something, I'm gonna tell a story about someone who remained nameless that I once did a race with, who was and for some reason we had an intercom system. It was quite an old car, but it had an intercom system in it. And we were I think we were a circuit in Europe, and he radioed in to say the car had died. And he said, the car's just died. And we were like, oh, get out and have a look. So we had a look, said he had a look. And eventually, it just, we had to just call it a day, really. And the car was just resting there. What he didn't know is I had a GoPro running in the car, but I hadn't told him. So
you do that often, Chris, in your life? Have a camera running somewhere?
Back in the I was an early adopter for GoPros. And he, these days you operate like there's a camera watching you in all your life, don't you? But in those days you didn't. Anyhow, what I saw was this lovely moment where after 10 minutes of flailing around, getting angry, blaming the car, it dawned he started to move his right knee towards the electrical cutout switch. And he spotted where his knee had turned the cutout off as he was flailing around for oversteer. And then he sheepishly, gingerly, just puts his hand down, turns it on again, and then starts the engine. And then
no one's noticed.
And he thinks, fuck, I can't drive it back. I've said it's broken. So he turns the electrical switch off again and just pulls it out a bit and then gets out of the car. I've never, ever told him that I've got the footage.
No.
You've got to, can you text us during this now?
Actually, I'll tell you in person, all right?
Okay.
He knows who he is. He's listening.
But it was a genius moment because I just remember thinking, it was that moment where you see, it was over his shoulder and he was thinking, knee, if I put my right knee, is it conceivable? Could my knee hit that? That's what happened.
And why wouldn't he? Do you not? Because you were basically you're going to finish last, whatever. That he would just drive back. What was that?
Because I think it's interesting. It's a good question. I think it's such a febrile situation, and even though you're teammates, you're competing against each other. And if you've given it the whole, the car shit itself down the radio, and there was probably a bit of, blaming the team and the vehicle. If then you've got to climb back and go, I actually just turned it off with my knee. Maybe you're too invested in your story you sold, aren't you? You can't. How do you row
back up that road?
Maybe it also shows you that we were sort of teammates, not busy mates. And if you were with your best mates driving, I think you could come back from anything. But yes, it was. I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. Right. Sorry, Christmas cold. We're going to move on to a new subject. This week, we're going to talk about the fact that Honda and Nissan are merging. We're also going to recognise the fact that... Oh, it's upside down. So I'll tell you now, because we have a very, very open policy on gifts to the podcast, but there's a gentleman that works for this company that sends us these Snickers bars. Yeah. That's the reason I look the way I do, and I absolutely love them. So thank you very much.
Breakfast of champions, really is.
Yeah, it's a breakfast of champions.
So, Chris Cooper, Honda, Nissan, talking about combining forces.
So there's some good news in this, because part of the story is that because the Nissan factory in Sunderland is operating under capacity, and the Nissan factory in Sunderland is really Nissan manufacturing in Europe, the possibility of some of that spare capacity being utilised to manufacture Honda cars, with the Honda factory in Swindon having closed a few years ago, that's good news. The wider story is a bit more fundamental. It is the fact that two Japanese companies that are completely different in culture, but actually quite similar in terms of what they do, could merge. Bottom line, we're going to end up with Boeing and Airbus, figuratively speaking. We're going to end up with two bigger, maybe one US, maybe one European, maybe one Japanese, one European. Maybe we're going to end up with three. Anybody who's followed the aviation industry through post-war period up to about the 2010s, how many aviation companies are there merged into and lost within Boeing and Airbus? I mean, it's dozens and dozens. The Blackburn Aircraft Company, anybody? Sort of in BAE Systems, but BAE have tried to merge with Airbus a couple of times, and the most recent time in 2012-13, the Germans vetoed it. So it feels sort of inevitable that manufacturers that we think are established are unbelievably fragile and exposed. That's what this story says.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I often like to view current automotive news through the lens of the car magazine George Casher news desk of 1989, which for me was always the best. And I used to love the way they'd interpret the automotive industry with a sort of slightly different angle. Autocar was more straightforward; it was more news reporting, and I just think they would have wanted to go in depth about the cultural friction between Honda and Nissan. But I thought about it for a minute, and I suppose that the existential threat they both face, more Nissan at the moment, means that there's not even time for that discussion, is it? They've got to sit in a room, work out whether they can do it. But if someone at the back goes, yeah, but Honda's passionate about engineering. Look, we use all independent rear suspensions on hatchbacks and everyone else uses beam axles. I think the accountants will go, and fuck off. We can't listen to you anymore.
Yeah, we've just seen that fire over there. Yeah.
We have to survive. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, I think it's interesting. So the Honda share price, when the news came out this week, the Honda share price went down by about 5%.
Yeah.
The Nissan share price went up by 30%. So, and you can see, I mean, Nissan had some shocking results earlier on this quarter, along with lots of other people as well. So it feels inevitable there's going to be a shaking out. It is a mature industry. Unlike other mature, if you took the mobile phone marketplace, are we down to Samsung and iPhone now, where 20, 30 years ago, we used to buy 30 years ago, we would buy Christmas presents for our loved ones and of a mobile phone. Nobody would do that now because it's an iPhone or a Samsung. The Sony Mars bar, they're all gone. Cars are different, obviously, because there's an awful lot of desire and not necessarily essential nature about all car purchases. But we're going to end up with something close to a Boeing and an Airbus.
No, Clifford.
Well, on that phone comment. Did you see? There's a business called, I think, Foxconn,
Yeah.
and they make Apple phones basically.
Bits.
Taiwanese. They are considering a bid for Nissan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're not at the minute getting stuck in between this, but the fact that the factory that makes the iPhone can probably afford 10 billion quid to buy Nissan.
Yeah.
I mean, how mad is that?
And it does probably suggest that there is a bit about what's a car company nowadays? And the bit about pressing bits of steel for the side of a car and a foundry for making the engines that we really love, that's a smaller part of what makes a car now. So are all car makers, is it reasonable for all car makers to think we make the whole car? Maybe that moment has passed, and there'll be some to say, we're really good at doing systems or sensors or driver assistance systems or Foxconn because it's about data and the CAN buses and all the comms in the car, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So mergers of equals, like Honda's got loads of factories and they're vertically integrated. Nissan's got loads of factories vertically integrated. Maybe this is the merger or the supposed merger where we decompose what's a car company.
Yeah. I mean, it reads to me like it's a bit like the RBS situation and Gordon Brown ringing the guy at Lloyd saying, just to let you know, mate, you're
H-Boss, yeah,
as H-Boss, you're going to go and do that, because it reads like the Japanese government is saying to Honda,
yeah,
you need to go, and so it's not a merger.
Yeah,
it's not
a rescue.
Because I think Honda's market cap is 35 billion.
It's 4 times.
So it's not a merger. It's basically Japanese government saying you've got to go and take over Nissan. Basically, that's sort of how it read. And again, I'm not sort of industry wide in completely, but Nissan were early adopters and early success in hybrid.
Yeah,
and they've lost that momentum. They lost all of that. They didn't. Was it the Leaf? Presumably, it was the Leaf that was.
Well, that was the first. That was an early full EV.
That was a pure EV, the Leaf, actually, not a hybrid.
That's supposed to be the heart of the problems, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there's the sort of China thing as well, isn't there?
Yeah, sure.
I think to it's very, very difficult. Not as if I've ever done it, but I read a lot about it. To put two companies together, it looks like it's going to be. There's lots of stuff by Carlos Ghosn talking about it, isn't it? And obviously Renault are sat
Is he
there
still
going,
on the run?
Well, he's out, isn't he?
He's out of Japan because he got smuggled out, didn't he? Or
in a cello box,
or cello. So, but didn't he have to go to a country that didn't have a extradition treaty with Japan still? Or wasn't he in Beirut for a bit?
I think he was.
But he is Lebanese, isn't he?
He is
Lebanese.
He is Lebanese. I think it's going to be. Maybe they've got, as you say, Chris, they've got no choice. But I think these things are always incredible. It sort of means almost probably the end of Nissan, if it does in that respect, because they make the same sort of cars, right? It's not as if
they're quite, they're not like that.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating, and I suppose natural segue to that question: do we care enough about these residual brands that we've known throughout all of our car-loving years, whether they're Japanese brands or they're Western brands or American brands, whatever it is, European brands, sorry. Do you care enough about the survival of those names and badges to tell your friends that ask you whether you should buy a Chinese electric car not to buy the electric car? That's what it comes down to. The Chinese have arrived, and I've got people I know that say, I just bought one of these BYD things, and I'm like, there's a bit of me that, I'm not a protectionist, there's a bit of me that thinks, I hope you know there are some consequences to everyone buying Chinese cars.
Consequence-free, yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't or you shouldn't, but it does mean that the volumes they want to sell these things in this continent means that it's inevitable. There's going to be a lot more of these news stories about car brands disappearing than we knew. But do we care enough? Should we care? What do you think, Neil?
I mean, I'm sure, like all four of us, we're a minority because to many people, they're a form of transport and they're a washing machine or a hairdryer. It doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously, I care because you've got all these memories, knowledge, information, love of all brands that you want them. But I suppose it's naive to think they're all going to survive. But
Yeah.
Nissan, I mean,
There's
this
a
is going to
great
make it the third biggest car company in the world, right? After Toyota and Volkswagen, maybe. And
Tesla, yeah, but by
you
value, yeah.
know,
Which brand of hairdryer do you use, Neil?
um, I only buy them at Christmas for other people.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
there's a great quote in the FT for me, which just shows the other side of this, which is basically about Japan's um, kind of modern Japan post stagflation. What they're really saying is that demographics mean there are no workers, so you don't have to worry so much about laying people off. And deregulation means mergers and acquisitions are going to go through the roof. So, in other words, stuff like this becomes attractive to do in Japan. And it's a brilliant quote from the Times. It just says, as well as the FT, as well as growing global competition, Japan Inc. is being pushed towards mergers by investor friendly corporate governance reforms, rising shareholder activism, a shrinking domestic market, and tightening labor availability, say the nation's top
Hmm.
executives. And you glue it together with what a politician, again, quoting the FT, says. It's just great. It says, merger talks between Honda and Nissan and the potential creation of the world's third biggest car maker
Hmm.
represent a critical admission for the whole of corporate Japan. The best time to consolidate was yesterday. The second best time is today.
Hmm.
And it's as much about what Japan is going through and feeling. I mean, this was the industrial giant when we were all growing up,
Hmm.
and now just over the ocean, there's another one, and it's got a young population. It thought this through. It thought this through a long time ago. To Chris's point, it's not. They just went. This is not car making. It's not about pressing metal and ICs. It's about supply chains. It's about getting minerals. It's about tech. And they invested in it massively and heavily. They're using plants that make Foxconn look tiny to build these things. They're going for their domestic consumption, and now they're coming after the rest of the world with these fantastic, stroke not fantastic products. I mean, what's going to be interesting is, will Trump really whack these tariffs on?
Yes.
Will he try to squeeze the Chinese coming to America? And is it wrong?
Hmm.
So
So
I remember going to cover the Detroit Motor Show in 2004 for Channel 4, whatever it was. I don't know why I was there. And Detroit, it was already starting to die. Detroit show was still something of a spectacle. But there was a basement where all the Chinese manufacturers are sort of shunted down below. And it acted as a sort of ghouls horror show, really. You went down there to laugh at the cars. It was like a sort of Victorian circus where you laughed at disfigured people. It was really wrong. You went down there to laugh at how shit they were. And I remember thinking to myself, this could be problematic. I'm not saying I had a crystal ball, but my God, were Western car makers ridiculously relaxed and they didn't see what was coming.
yeah, they were far too, particularly the big three in Detroit.
Yeah.
When must have been during the GFC when they were all in trouble, and they turned up at the Senate and congressional hearings in Washington, and they all travelled there in their corporate jets.
Yeah, I know. So anyhow, but it'd be fascinating, and I suppose actually it'll be the first of many, won't it? There's going to be a lot more of these stories about mergers. I think Neil's quite right, though. This isn't a merger. This is Honda being told to rescue Nissan,
Yeah.
and the history of these situations means that both brands never survive, really, do they? One always disappears. There has been precedent to this. When I ask the question broadly, do we or would we miss these brands? Who here misses Saab?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, totally.
I don't really.
I couldn't afford one at the time. It was still really around when they made the great products like 9000. I thought when I was a student and early working years, my first boss when I was at Deloitte's, David, he won't be listening, but if you are, it was a super duper car. Used to drive everywhere at 100 million miles an hour. Saab 9000, the early one, not the facelift one. How cool was that?
Cool car, yeah. Yeah.
Would
I
you buy
mean,
one now if they made a 2024 Saab 9000 EV or hybrid?
oh, it was a very lovely middle class architect's brand. It was
Yeah,
thinking man's BMW, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
It was
but
it was a viable alternative.
but if we talk about potentially missing car brands, could you flip it on its head and say, well, there are too many anyway? You know, how many other industries have so many brands
Well,
selling the same product?
that's the Airbus Boeing thing,
Yeah,
and you look at. We've talked about this privately ourselves. There's a great book called Empire of the Skies, which is a brilliant book from probably about 10 years ago now, tracking the history of the post-war British aviation and aerospace industry and all of those different companies and where they got
Avro.
to
Mm.
and nationalization in the 60s and then the emergence of ultimately of British aerospace and then the privatization of that in the 80s. My firm worked in British aerospace a lot about 20 years ago. And it was really, really quite emotional because you talk to people who say, well, I'm a Blackburn Aircraft Company guy and Blackburn Buccaneer. You know, we all remember growing up with Buccaneer and the Falklands War and the first Gulf War. So nothing stopped that. So
One of the beneficiaries of this is Renault because their equity is in Nissan shares.
yeah,
They've just, I think they're earning a few billion quid out of that jump in the share
I
price.
saw that diagram this afternoon.
Mm.
Yes,
and the irony is that they've started to get a handle on this EV thing. Renault have, I think, they got a bit of a march on some of their European competitors, and I think that there'll be families throughout Europe thinking, well, I could buy a BYD. And this Renault 5's not quite, hasn't got quite the stats, but look at it, it's a much nicer object.
It's just a nice thing. Do you think, Chris, that this has been a really interesting subject here? Do you think we've now overtaken the All In podcast as the go-to place for global economic, strategic, industrial advice?
I think that's.
I've got 2 words for you. The second word's off.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
No, I don't think we have. But I'd certainly like to bookend the front of this with as many of their sponsors as they have. Good God, they've got a few, haven't they?
Ooh,
Well done.
Maybe we'll talk about sponsorship in a bit.
On that note,
on that note, I'm raising my Snickers bar to the screen. So moving on. A lovely segue. Chris Cooper's just given me the beautiful way. He's just lubed me up to slide into the next section.
That would have done it.
Does motorsport sponsorship work? And if KY doesn't come in with a big fat ass deal now, I'll be disappointed. Chris Cooper, this is more your world than anyone else's. Does motorsport sponsorship work?
It totally works. It totally works. I mean, who didn't think when Parmalat was sponsoring Formula One cars in the 80s? Who didn't think when he went on holiday to Europe and you saw Parmalat branded products in the supermarket, whatever? Who didn't think, I want to buy that rather than anything else? When Candy was sponsoring Tyrrell in the early 80s, and you think, what on earth is Candy? They made washing machine stuff. Why have we got Electrolux or let's have Candy? And the most obvious one, those cars there, Gulf. When you see a Gulf petrol station, how does it make you feel? You just want to go in there. I've got plenty of petrol. I just want to go in there because I've got an emotional attachment to what it just makes me feel wonderful and positive. So does Motorsport sponsorship work? It totally works. Ask Zach Brown at McLaren. Does Motorsport sponsor? He's got more sponsors than he's got bits of car to stick it on. I mean, when you drive take off their overalls and you see their flame-proof underwear, it's just sponsor-centric.
Okay, Manish, I'll send this to you, and I'm going to ask you to try and view it as slightly less of an F1 tragic than you are.
Sure, but I mean, I'm going to start by being an F1 tragic and say that Philip Morris built Formula One. I mean, it's just as simple as that. You can't talk to Bernie about integrating the sport without bringing in a guy called John Hogan, who ran Philip Morris, or that commercial side. He brought Niki Lauda back into Formula One. He paid James Hunt he stuck those Marlboro stickers on a BRM and then onto McLaren and then onto Ferrari. I mean, it's an extraordinary. I think let's forget Formula One. I mean, why would I know what 555 was? That wasn't from Formula One. That's from rallying. And Chris has just said, where does Martini first go? It doesn't go to Formula One, does it? We had Martini on endurance cars. I mean, it's an extraordinary motorsport's an extraordinary thing, and I think it does three things, doesn't it? Age, it gets people in young. Kids just love fast moving. You just get it. You get them, and you establish your brand very young. It can be a very abstract brand, but that name sits in your head. I certainly didn't drink Martini as a 9-year-old, but I didn't also know what Ajip. I would never have known what Ajip was, but I did because it was on the side of a Ferrari. Alitalia. I mean, I knew BOAC or British Airways or Air India. Alitalia. That's all over. Literally the most beautiful launcher ever. So, does motorsport sponsorship work? 100 billion% does it work, except in one small case, in my opinion, which is on the side of a Haas, because I still don't know what industrial tools they are. But apart from that,
they're a really, really big
no,
brand
I know. I'm being cheeky.
of manufacturing, automated manufacturing machine tools.
Sure. No, I get it. I think maybe they could do a better job at saying that, except for the word Haas.
All the machine tools in our office here are Haas.
No.
Yeah, they are. We're obviously we're a consulting business, so we have a lot of machine tools.
Yes,
and they're all Haas because of that deal. Yeah,
but they should stand on a stool and make that very, 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 very.
Neil Clifford.
It was quite funny, wasn't it, that when we were listing all of those companies that are so successful in motorsport that have all gone bust because they've sponsored Formula One.
or had some financial irregularities, Neil. Maybe that one is.
I'm not so sure that my logic reflecting on those two answers is the same as all that. One of the hardest things in my job, as I do have this title of Chief Executive Officer, which I sort of blag my way through on a daily basis, is judging whether marketing budgets work. And frankly, it's quite impossible unless you only do one thing. And if you do multiple things, then you have no idea which bit's working. And, okay, well, of course, you can judge brand awareness. Let's just pay another company 250 grand a year, and every month they're going to come in and tell you your global brand awareness graph and whether it's going up or down, which in fact is much cheaper just to look at Google searches. It's free. And then you can see whether people are looking for your brand or not. I'm very skeptical about this, even though I adore F1, and if suddenly the company that I run had a complete excess of cash, and therefore we're going to say, we're going to double our marketing budget this year, because wouldn't that be great? Because that will improve the company and that will be really good, and we'll build a much bigger global audience. Of course, I would say, I think we should sponsor a Formula One car. Because fundamentally, my cynical take on it is companies that sponsor Formula One, and I'm talking more about Formula One than anything else, the marketing people or the chief executives just love Formula One. And if you are a chief executive-y type person, you don't want to go and spend 500 quid on a shitty ticket and eat hot dog in Mexico, like I've done, and it's 97,000 degrees, and it's you're queuing up to get the ticket, and it's buying a normal ticket in F1, even though it's nice, it's a bit of a pain in the arse because it's all a bit smelly and grubby. Let me finish, Manish.
Sorry, I want to ask you a question.
But if someone says to me, if you sponsor my lovely Formula One team and you put a tiny little sticker on Lewis's head, just here, and it's only going to cost you £9 billion, but you're going to get tickets for every Formula One race around the world for you and your family, and you can go and walk up and down the pit lane and all of that. Of course, you're going to say, "What a fabulous idea for marketing!"
Yeah, that's not sponsorship, though. That's something else.
Well, it's the same shit, isn't it? You're sticking a sticker on the side of a car. That's sponsorship, isn't it?
Neil, you just answered my question before I asked it. I was just going to literally say, do you think the Formula One was built on a little Rolodex that Bernie had of, say, 30 executives, maybe not the most attractive men in the world, but guys who quite like motorsport, went up to them and said, listen, you want to sponsor Formula One? Come to 16 weekends a year. You'll love it. It's all sorted.
Yes.
I think I think all of you've covered the sort of the poles of this. I find it fascinating. Like so much of life, it comes back to Yes Minister. There's an amazing episode of it's actually Yes Prime Minister, where is it Yes? I think it's Yes Prime Minister, where Humphrey goes to Lords. So Humphrey goes to Lords as a guest of whatever it's called, British. They call it British something tobacco, the acronym, so as not to be libelous. And he talks about patronage. And he says, we're so lucky. He's being very sycophantic. And he says to the CEO, he says, we're so lucky that we have your patronage for so many of our sports. And I do believe that if you're a company that makes billions of pounds in the UK, you sort of have a social duty to throw some of that back into an arena that people enjoy life. And sport is the obvious one to do that. So, when Embassy used to sponsor the World Snooker Championship, I don't think sales of Players Navy Cup went up. And I can remember going there because a friend of mine's dad was a director of Imperial Tobacco. And you used to go into this little the hospitality unit was like a tent off the back of the Crucible Theatre. Yeah. And they wouldn't check you for weapons, but if you had a non Imperial Tobacco brand of fags, they would take them off you, was planted with these coffin nails they made down in Brit. So I think patronage is important, but what undoes this idea that sponsorship is just at the whim of a CEO that happens to like the sport is that there have been very successful long-term commercial partnerships between brands and particularly motorsport teams that have obviously worked because they've lasted such a long time. And that's the bit where I think you have to say, if you look at it cleverly and you box clever, you don't just come in with the big I am and say, we've got 10 billion, let's buy the whole thing by the side of the car, whatever you're going to have. But if you go in strategically and cleverly and try and understand or maybe tell a story about how you can integrate your business into Formula One, or I'm saying Formula One, but any motorsport, I think it can be really powerful, actually.
Yeah, it can. Yeah. I'm being slightly cynical, obviously.
No, but also I can see that. How many times I can remember when my father was an accountant, my late father, and he worked for some of the big firms, and out of nowhere, this firm decided they were going to sponsor a player rating system in Test cricket. It was the first one that ever came out. It was very early 90s, called the Coopers and Lybrand batting averages or something. I think it was batting and bowling, and it rated players individually, but they were treated as individuals, not within their teams. I remember saying to my father, "What's in it for you?" And he was just like, "Well, one of the bosses just clearly likes cricket."
Likes cricket.
That was, were they going to get any more contracts? Because probably not. Although one never knows how much business might be done in a box at Lords or whatever you're going to do. Yeah. But I just think sport is a great place to spend money that would otherwise go to the exchequer. Get out your marketing budget, and go and throw it at something that makes people smile. It's a great thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
The discussion about how do you know that it's working? I mean, I can't sort of say who it is. And you and I were talking about it when we came back from our lunch last week. So we've just done quite a bit of work with a very large British institution with a very well-known public brand. And they have a new CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. And one of the things we were looking at with them was, okay, well, how, and you spend like 100 and something million plus a year on various kinds of marketing. How do you measure it? Conversation another time when we do a second version of our All In podcast is looking at all of the metrics across above the line, below the line, social media, personalized, all those kind of things, blah, blah, blah. And you look at what Zach does and what he did with his business before he went to McLaren and how he did it. Some of those discussions started because there was somebody who thought, I like the idea, I'm excited by it, I get the glamour. But to get, Chris, as you said, a lot of money out of them consistently, you've got to be able to link that to some form of indicator. It might not necessarily be we sell more widgets, or deepens our relationship in some way with somebody.
Yeah.
All things are relevant. So, and some of that actually transfers to the podcast world as well.
Well, I think sponsoring podcasts is the next opportunity.
I think it is too.
What I would say is, if you, I mean, fuck motorsport. You want to be in podcasts.
You do.
I agree.
It's the new motorsport.
Yeah.
Chris, just one thing I would say, just about Zach. You got to remember, Zach is kind of the Luke Skywalker to the Jedi Master of John Hogan. You know, John took Zach under his wing, and Zach will tell you that now. I mean, Zach learned his chops from John.
Oh, did he?
John really, really knew how to make money out of this, how to sell it, how to give brands, that value, because, he'd been so much a part of the machine of F1 and motor racing.
Tell you what, I'm glad you said that. I thought you were going to say he'd snogged his sister. Right. So moving on. Favourite American car? A quick one, because we've not done anything absolutely nerdy. I drove past a Mustang on the road yesterday. I just like American cars. I think I've been wrong about American cars most of my life. There you go. So, Manish Pandey, what's your favourite American car today?
So just to be a little bit contradictory, as you know, I love things like wedges. They're made in Italy. They're light. They've got, it's not the one. They're light. They're aerodynamic. They handle really well. And I've always found American cars, modern American cars, a little bit antithetical to that. I'm not absolutely into the muscular aesthetic either, but I do have one American car that I would put into the top 10. Is he drinking?
I don't know.
Chris, are you actually opening more beer?
It's Christmas.
Jesus Christ. Sorry, for the benefit of those not watching, Chris Cooper is just opening a bottle of beer. In
Second beer.
In a non-dexterous manner.
Neil's
That
got
is two-thirds of what you can drink.
It's about 9/10 what I could drink.
Sorry, Manish, carry on.
I do have an American car that would be in my top 10 cars of all time. And it would definitely be a Duesenberg J Coupe 1930. That car there is just dollar for dollar, pound for pound, inch for inch. I don't think we produced anything in Europe that could touch that, apart from a couple of Bentleys maybe in that era. It's just perfection. It's beautiful. 8 cylinders in line. Look at the interior. Look at the exterior. It is light years ahead, I think. Beautiful American car.
Chris Cooper.
I've got 100 on my list of favourite American cars.
Yeah.
I mean, the point being that American car culture has been very badly understood and appreciated quite often in a lot of the UK and Europe and anywhere else. Starsky's Ford Torino, who didn't love that?
Yeah.
General Lee, bit of Daisy Duke, granted. Night Kit. Right now, GT350R. Mustang. Yeah. Who wouldn't love that? Galaxy 500, 4-door.
Don't take them all, for Christ's sake.
Take Cooper.
I reckon, but I want a special mention. I think we talked about a week or two ago a resto mod we'd like to unresto. And I think we all agreed the electric E-Type Jaguar was just awful. In the US, the resto culture and industry, I think, is really impressive. I really think it's impressive. And the sort of the rebuild. So super performance. Daytona Coupe.
Okay.
The short stroke LS7, 600, 8,500 revs. We need to do a whole episode on American cars and culture.
We will do that. Well, you've just done most of it there. Right.
He's left one for me. I've still got it.
There's loads.
Neil Clifford, go while you still can.
Okay. look, this is where it all started, as we know, for the boy of the 70s,
Yeah.
the dyslexic boy of the 70s, and because it was mainly pictures with a few numbers. Look at that. Is that actually? I've never seen one of these Ford. That you remember that Ford Cobra?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that car is now.
That's an unusual one. It's a drop top Mach 1.
Yeah, not seen one of those. And then we go to this man.
Oh, you'll get us in trouble here because even though
people don't like him. We
he
like him.
acknowledged the fact he was a total wrong un, but he was entertaining. All right.
We don't care if you don't like him because we like him.
Yeah.
And he had, as we know, because we've talked about it before, the Chevrolet Impala, but of course, being a player, as Jay would say, being a player, he had two.
The winter car and the summer car.
Winter car, summer car. So
I remember reading that, yes.
My car, I think it was 67, 68. I would go 64 Chevrolet Impala, convertible, black. Those 6 big red lights on the back, twin exhausts. Just, you can't buy them. They're not available. I just need to move to Los Angeles to go and buy one of these things. They're absolutely, and they were so, in my head, you saw a couple of 356s in the 70s, or you saw a 911, even if you were lucky, you went to London to see Buckingham Palace. You never saw American cars, did you?
No.
So to me, they were much more sophisticated. And the fact that displacement number, no one could beat you. I remember going
7.2 litre engine.
7,013 cc's.
Who's going to win that?
Beat that, you bastard. It was magic.
I completely agree. The first time I saw an American car, I always remember in the flesh, was on a holiday. And I remember the airport taxis at this place were all slightly older 70s American cars. And I always remember the noise of those very low revving V8s when you'd hear almost the piston strikes. They'd burble. And they all had sort of 2-speed automatic or 3-speed automatic gearboxes. So you'd hear the torque converters.
Yeah, crossplay.
And then you'd see the sort of live axles. And the car would sort of lollop a bit. And they just moved in a foreign way compared to an independently suspended European car. But there was a magic to them that there was something graceful. It was like seeing a massive whale as opposed to a dolphin. They just sort of they loped, didn't they? They sort of wallowed around.
If you parked one, it would still be just wallowing half an hour later.
Yeah. I'm biased. A 5th gen Camaro Z28. I crow about this car.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you get the chance to drive one or buy one, it's on a flat road, stacked up to anything Europe's done for a long time.
Is it the black one that you can call in? Yeah,
it's got road presence. I can remember I came up behind someone in the summer, a friend of mine. They were like, "What the hell is that? It just looks like it's going to eat you from behind."
Yeah.
But I suppose if there's anything about American cars that is totally misunderstood, is that people think they're crude. They're not. What they are is they're simple at times. They don't try and overcomplicate the recipe. And there's an analogy with cookery here. I think we all agree the best meals we've probably had are the ones with the simplest ingredients that were just put together with the greatest expertise, and they understood what a palate wanted. And I think American motor cars at their best, where they have outshone any other continent that makes these vehicles, is they understand exactly what the customer wants, and they don't try and mess around with it. And that's why the pony car, the Corvette, the Camaro, these things just nailed it.
Escalade.
Yeah.
Escalade.
They just get it. So there you go. Big up to our American compatriots because we love your cars. And some increasing viewer numbers over there would be quite handy as well. So we're going to move on to our 2-car garage, which is very simple this time. It's just 2 cars for Christmas. You're allowed 2 cars for Christmas. There's no limit on price because the man with the white hat and the beard has said you've had a good year. You can treat yourselves. So, Manish, what 2 cars are you going to have?
I'm going to have one for London. Mm-hmm. And if I really could have a car at Christmas in London, it would have to be a Rosso Corsa Ferrari 288 GTO.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Can you imagine driving around in Christmas in the ultimate Ferrari Sleigh? Black, leather interior Daytona seats.
Oh.
Just the noise that baby would make, the heads it would turn.
The little toggle switches with the black plastic on the. Oh, they're gorgeous, aren't
Clever
they?
Jason. Clever Jason.
Just beautiful, beautiful
got
car.
one?
Yeah.
That actually,
I
Scott's
love
at
Clever
lunch.
Jason.
Can you imagine that? Christmas Eve, if you could get a reservation, you'd pull up. You wouldn't have anything to drink because you just look at your car. You know, I'd have the Dover Soul there. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
With
I was offered my two. What's your 288 story now? Mine is that I turned one down in 2004 for £280,000.
Yeah, they were 300 grand. Yeah.
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 What are they now? 3?
3.5. Yeah. 3.5. Yeah.
Just unbelievable. I am an idiot. Right, Chris Cooper.
Oh wait, I only picked a car.
Oh, sorry, Manish. Sorry, we were so lost in your lovely tale of the 288, and I was imagining that slightly golden sheen on that Dover Soul because the butter had just caramelised.
It's just so perfect, that place, isn't it? Once every few years. And the other one, we, until my in-laws sadly passed away last year, we had every Christmas in Tobago for a decade, and Christmas was really special in the Caribbean. We would always do something like a lobster thermidor on Christmas Eve. And on Christmas Day, because my father-in-law was so English, so traditional, turkey and a ham. And what we would do is get up in the morning, go to the beach and take some sandwiches, enjoy a drink called an LLB, which is lemon, lime and bitters, have a good swim and a snorkel, come back early, help with the preparations, and we'd have an early Christmas dinner. And so the car that represents all of that for me is the exact opposite of a Ferrari 288 GTO, and it's a Daihatsu Terios.
There we go.
The Christmas car for me. Covered in sand, pair of snorkels, some snorkels in the back, flippers, lots of towels, and a little thermos and a little cool box. Perfect Christmas.
Chris Cooper.
So this Christmas, I'm actually worried about Santa. I'm worried for his welfare. You know, we all love the NORAD Santa tracker, don't we?
Yep.
Which tracks Santa around the world, giving presents to all the boys and girls of the world. In a slightly anxious and uneasy world. And we've seen those this week in the UK. The US has had it as well. Plagues of these drones over airfields or whatever. So I'm slightly worried about
this. We want to know more about why that
is happening. Do, and they haven't been able to knock them down or find out where they come from. It's all very rum and anxious. So for Santa, I think we're going to have to get him an F-22 stealth Raptor, where the reindeer can follow behind in a sort of slight cloak of invisibility, so that on Christmas Eve, Santa can deliver presents to all the boys and girls around the world. However, that's the first car. In the event that there's a problem, we need some emergency reindeer. So I think to make sure that emergency reindeer are on hand, I think coming along on the ground, or maybe in a magical way just above the surface of the ground, would be an Arctic Trucks big Toyota pickup thing, pulling an IFA Williams Stockmaster trailer. That's quite specific, isn't it? But that's what it would be. And the Stockmaster trailer, I think, could have about 7 or 8 emergency reindeer in it, just in case.
Okay.
The stealth Santa didn't quite get everybody through.
Substitute reindeer.
Yeah.
Chris Cooper's part in this podcast is sponsored by Stella Artois. Neil with an I.
Exactly. That's what I have in mind. It's that sort of thing. Yeah. For the emergency reindeer.
Look at that.
I know.
I read this question slightly differently on the basis we didn't actually write this question down. We just
Exactly.
1 hour before the podcast. The most Christmassy 2-car garage you could think of. So mine, I'm a bit pissed off actually, because if it would have been a no budget, what do you want for Christmas, Neil Clifford? The answer would be very different. But I racked my brains and thought, what is the most Christmassy 2-car garage? And of course, in at number 1, as we know, is Wham's Last Christmas.
Again.
And it's got a Nissan Patrol in it.
Yes.
Yes.
Feel my thunder.
Yes. Sorry, Neil. Sorry.
And of course, they and I was on my YTS scheme at the Fiat garage when they were trying to get to number one in 1984. But who stopped them getting to number one? Can we remember?
Band-Aid.
That's right, Band-Aid.
84, yeah.
That's right. And so, of course, it's very joyous. They were number one last year, number one this year. And the two cars that are in that video, I always remember because actually it's a lovely, lovely, joyous little happy, but slightly sinister because he's with the wrong girl and he keeps looking at that girl and all of that. So there's a Jeep. What are they?
Keep Wagoneer.
A short wheelbase, those
little Jeep Wrangler.
Little Wrangler Renegade convertible, which I think George is driving. He's probably a passenger, but he's in it. And then there's a red Nissan Patrol, which is
narrow-bodied. It's a proper early one.
It's a narrow-bodied, four-door, long wheelbase with a beautiful 80s decor going up the side with Patrol in big letters. Very Father Christmas in bright red. I don't think there's a better two-car garage for Christmassy things than
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a great choice. No, you interpreted the question better than us. Christmas cars, if you're a motoring journalist, it's a bit of a thing, actually. So I'll bore you for a second.
Oh, good.
When I started doing this for a living, I say that quite a lot on this podcast, you didn't earn much money. And I think if you're working on a magazine, you're not doing it for the money still now. Influencers and everything else has changed that. They get paid well, but the old magazine lot, it was tough. So there were a couple of perks. Obviously, you got to drive around in nice cars during the year, but your Christmas car was a de facto gift to you that you gave to yourself. So there was it was a really grey area. So there were lots. You get offered cars by car makers for Christmas, but then it was the best way of actually identifying, servicing the real hierarchy of the office. So effectively, the editor and the dep head would get the best cars, and if anyone below that, if you were seen to be in a car that was above your station, it was a massive. Well, he's done that behind someone. She's done that behind someone's back.
Oh, good.
And
there's a lot of office politics you can imagine, and if you're on the road test desk, the best way around it, because we still had this in those days, was to get some stuff in that was fucking leery because there was no traction control. So I can remember once we had a Dodge Viper GTS that was being offered around. I'm like, but anyone in the senior team want to have this? They're all like, fuck that. Well, that would be in a ditch straight away. So what you try and do is get some stuff booked in that was leery as hell, didn't have any form of traction control or ABS, because all the people that wanted to show off in it didn't want to be anywhere near it when it was damp roads on those early cut Michelins. So that was one way around it. But nice. It was a lot of sneaky blaggery would go on. Like people would mysteriously say, "Well, can you just send it to my home because it's easier for me because I'm going away." So people would have a fortnight in a really nice car, and then we'd only find out afterwards when the speeding ticket would come through. Oh, so you had a 911 for a couple of weeks? We didn't know about that. That was nice. Yeah. But for me, so over the years, I've always had Christmas cars. I've got a Christmas car. They still do it now. I have a Bentley Continental GT outside here. That every year Bentley says, "Do you want to have a Bentley for 10 days over Christmas?" And I always say yes. Doesn't compromise me at all. I think they're brilliant cars, and it makes my Christmas. And I'll tweet about it or whatever you do, Instagram about it, and we'll do a film. It's quite weird getting in a Bentley. It's a hybrid, and it does move away silently. Some brands were made to be electric, weren't they? When you think about it. But there was always one car that I had one Christmas that was for me the ultimate Christmas car, and it does sync with a subject we've talked about quite a lot over the last month. I can remember when they stopped making the X308 XJR, which for me was the favourite one. They did a run-out model, like 100 or something of them, and they were black with the big wheels and the Brembo brakes.
Yeah.
And I had my favourite relative, Auntie Janet, don't have, no sob story, don't have really family, but she was great. And I can remember having to drive her all the way down from London to the south coast, down to sort of Torbay area, the long drive. And I wanted something comfortable, so Auntie Janet, who was old and a bit achy, was going to be cosseted. And this Jaguar XJR just did the best job. And for some of it, she sat in the back, so she felt special. And I think whenever I see an XJR on the road, I remember that journey, and I remember that being the ultimate Christmas car. I don't know why, but of all my Christmas cars, the X308 XJR, it just felt special. Every time I got in it, I just thought, I shouldn't be in this car. It's too good for me. Let's move on. So Chris
That's only one.
So I've got to do two, haven't I? Well, it's fairly obvious what the other one is, isn't it? It's my yellow banana, because I don't want any other car.
That's all you want for Christmas.
70, God knows what, 1,000 miles, full of rattles and squeaks, smells of the dog, but I mean, just what a machine. It's part of my body now. I see people buy these bloody Porsches and they do 500 miles in them and move them on. Just, you're kidding yourselves. There's no point. You want to enjoy the car, don't you? There's a whole point of having it. It's like having a wine cellar and looking at them. Get in there, get shit-faced.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some music. Neil Clifford.
Look, I'm going straight back into Wham. I'm going to choose that Wham song. Really,
It's the best Christmas song.
It's the best Christmas song. It's the best Christmas song. So Wham, Last Christmas.
Manish.
I'm going to go for something else with bagpipes, hybrid Christmas, New Year's. It's a song called Melon Wint by King Creosote. Absolutely extraordinary piece of
King
music.
Creosote.
Have a look.
Well, it bloody wins name, doesn't it, of the year?
As opposed to Mr. Creosote.
Fantastic band. Great piece of music.
Chris Cooper.
You're all wrong. Because it's All Come, All Ye Faithful.
No.
Oh.
Just Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, that on your smart speaker. Love it.
Some music isn't Christmassy, but sounds Christmassy to me. It has nothing to do with Christmas, but for some reason, I like a bit of John Williams. I like to I just think some of his big scores make me feel festive, and I think the one that I love listening to when I'm pottering around on Christmas morning is the Jurassic Park theme tune. I just think I always put it on. How random is that? Massive dinosaurs, that meme where the head gets turned and she sees the bloke with the big willy, all that stuff. I just, for me, I love a bit of John Williams. So I'm going to say, put on that Jurassic Park theme. It's absolutely magic piece of music.
Yeah. E.T. does that as well. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're listening to this after Christmas, if you've not had a good Christmas, go out, see some friends, drive your car, settle with your car, do whatever you do, but make sure it involves a car because we love cars. And if you've had a good Christmas, then well done. And I hope you managed to keep it on the rails in preparation for the next big night, which is in a couple of days' time. So on behalf of Manish Pandey, Chris Cooper, Neil with an I, and me, Chris Harris, thank you very much for listening to more of our dribble.
Merry Christmas.